Something strange is happening behind the scenes of Diddy's downfall, and it has nothing to do with lawyers, appeals, or leaked statements, because word on the street is, Diddy isn't just angry at the jokes being made about him. He's furious because he believes Nicki Minaj just stole the one lifeline he thought he had left. While he's sitting in Fort Dix watching his public image collapse, insiders say Diddy is privately spiraling. Not because of the Kardashians' punchlines, but because Nicki may have quietly stepped into the very political lane he thought belonged to him, the lane that could have convinced the White House to save him. And if that's true, it means the pardon he's been whispering about might not even have his name on it anymore. Stay right here, because once you understand why this shift matters, Diddy's sudden panic starts to make a lot more sense. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the updates the mainstream avoids. And drop a comment. Do you think Diddy overestimated his influence, or did Nicki simply play the game better? The fallout around Diddy's public image didn't begin with jokes, headlines, or late-night commentary. It began the moment his conviction shifted the power he once relied on. Inside Fort Dix, that shift is hitting him harder than the outside world realizes. What used to be automatic influence, access, connections, has turned into a slow, uncomfortable realization that the same rules he once bent now apply to him in full. From the minute his sentence started, sources say Diddy expected to maintain the kind of status he held in the industry, untouchable, respected, above the noise. But prison is its own ecosystem, and reputation doesn't travel the way fame does. What he's discovering, according to insiders, is that respect inside those walls doesn't come from past achievements. It comes from behavior, humility, and consistency. Three things he hasn't exactly displayed since arriving. Instead of adjusting, he's reportedly watching the world shift without him. The media landscape he once dominated now moves on effortlessly. Conversations that used to revolve around him now circulate without his name anywhere in sight. And while he's still trying to control narratives through lawyers and statements, he's beginning to see that the culture no longer pauses when he snaps his fingers. This growing awareness that influence fades faster than ego is setting the tone for everything that follows. If Section 1 was about the shift in power, Section 2 is about the sting, because the part that's reportedly cutting Diddy the deepest isn't the sentence, the isolation, or even the loss of control, it's who replaced him. For years, Diddy moved through the entertainment world with the confidence of someone who believed he was permanently anchored at the top. He built an empire around the idea that culture revolved around him, that he could pick up the phone and change a headline, redirect a narrative, or silence a whisper. But now, as insiders describe it, he's watching other names take the spotlight he once protected with his entire career. And the person at the center of that spotlight today isn't someone he ever expected to compete with. Nicki Minaj stepping into political spaces, taking meetings, making statements tied to global issues that reportedly rattled him in a way few things have. Not because Nicki isn't influential, but because her influence is clean, current, and untainted by the scandals that swallowed his entire public persona. To Diddy, sources say this feels like a symbolic dethroning. The industry seat he assumed would wait for him suddenly has someone else in it. Someone younger, louder, and still supported by a fan base that hasn't disowned her. The irony, Diddy spent years telling everyone that he was hip-hop's political power broker, the one who could sway elections, energize communities, and leverage his brand for influence. But the moment he fell, the same power he bragged about moved on without hesitation. And inside Fort Dix, that realization reportedly burns more than any headline ever could. Where he once expected a strategic comeback narrative, he's now watching a new storyline form, one that doesn't include him at all. If Section 2 captured the emotional sting of being replaced, Section 3 digs into why that replacement matters far more than bruised pride. Because according to insiders, this isn't just about visibility or relevance, it's about leverage, and right now, Diddy has none. For years, Diddy positioned himself as a political asset. He floated endorsements, hinted at kingmaker abilities, and treated his influence like a currency he could spend whenever he wanted. In his mind, that currency was enough to secure favors, build alliances, and when the pressure got tight, even negotiate a path out of trouble. But influence doesn't survive scandal. Not his kind anyway. Once the federal charges hit, once the public testimonies surfaced, and once reputational damage scattered across every major platform, whatever political weight Diddy thought he carried evaporated. And the people who once entertained his calls began pivoting toward voices they believed could still move the needle. That's where Nicki enters the story. Because while Diddy's name became toxic, Nicki's name remained powerful, controversial at times, yes, but firmly tethered to a massive global fan base. Unlike Diddy, she wasn't walking into political conversations tailed by active investigations or accusations that would make any administration nervous. This shift reportedly left Diddy spiraling, not because he expected eternal loyalty, but because he believed he still held bargaining chips. Instead, federal officials, political players, and cultural strategists all started gravitating towards someone whose influence came without legal explosions attached to it. Inside Fort Dix, this reality has reportedly sparked a new layer of frustration, one that goes beyond cell walls and lost freedom. It's the realization that the game moved on without him, and the seat he thought he'd reclaim might be gone permanently. And that fear leads us directly into the next section. Why this power shift isn't just humiliating, it could be the reason his last hope for a pardon may already be slipping away. If Section 3 revealed the loss of influence, Section 4 exposes why that loss isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. And it's hitting Diddy right where he always believed he was untouchable: political access. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: insiders keep circling around. Political capital is transactional, it's not emotional, and it's definitely not nostalgic. It moves toward whoever can deliver attention, voters, cultural momentum, or headlines that benefit the people in power. Once the storm around Diddy became impossible to ignore, that capital began redirecting itself with precision. And this is where the transition becomes crucial. While Diddy is confined, battling legal pressure from multiple sides, Nicki Minaj is moving in the exact opposite direction. She's aligning herself with platforms, conversations, and political circles that still see value in visibility, and more importantly, value in a figure who can mobilize millions of supporters without the cloud of ongoing investigations hovering over their heads. According to sources close to these discussions, this contrast created a silent reshuffling, one Diddy neither expected nor prepared for. For years, he positioned himself as the cultural bridge between entertainment and politics. Now, from the inside looking out, he's realizing that bridge can be rebuilt without him. But the part that reportedly stings the most isn't the shift itself, it's how quickly it happened. People who once answered his calls are now leaning towards someone with cleaner optics, a fresher reach, and fewer complications. That kind of pivot doesn't just bruise the ego, it destabilizes the entire structure of a man who once believed influence could outlast accountability. And now, inside Fort Dix, that realization is setting in. The world outside his cell isn't waiting for him, the political stage isn't holding a spotlight open, and the players he thought he controlled are making new alliances without looking back. This leads directly into the next part of the story, the personal fallout inside the prison walls, and why the Kardashians' commentary hit him harder than the public ever realized. What happens next is where the emotional hit lands hardest, because Section 5 shifts from political maneuvering to something far more personal: public humiliation. And according to insiders, that's the part Diddy cannot stomach. The Kardashians' joke didn't go viral because it was clever. It hit because it signaled something Diddy never expected. The door to elite Hollywood has quietly closed behind him, and for someone who built his entire persona on exclusivity, status, and access, that blow isn't just embarrassing, it's destabilizing. Here's why this moment matters. For decades, Diddy believed he was untouchable in those circles. He was the man invited to the tables, included in the rooms, and photographed next to the billionaires. The Kardashians were allies, collaborators, and sometimes beneficiaries of the same ecosystem of influence he operated in. So when they laughed publicly, in front of millions, on a major platform, it sent a message far louder than the joke itself: you're not one of us anymore. This shift strikes deeper than any headline or court filing, because it dismantles the identity Diddy curated meticulously for years. And inside Fort Dix, where image is often the only armor a high-profile inmate has left, the realization hits like a weight dropped on the chest. The transition here is important. It wasn't the joke, it was the symbolism. Kim and her circle used to signal acceptance. Now they are signaling distance. And in a world where power is perception, that distance becomes the new reality. People close to the situation say this is one of the reasons Diddy reacted with anger rather than indifference. It's not simply that a joke was made, it's that it confirmed what he already feared. The world outside has moved on without him. His seat at the table has been filled, and the people he once believed would protect his reputation are treating him like a punchline. That emotional break, the one between perception and reality, is exactly what sets up the next part: the quiet shift happening behind the scenes with Nicki Minaj, and why Diddy thinks she stole the political influence he thought he owned. The conversation now shifts from humiliation to strategy, because insiders say this is the moment Diddy realized something even more unsettling. While he's behind bars watching his influence evaporate, someone else has quietly stepped into the political lane he believed he controlled. And that someone, according to sources, is Nicki Minaj. To understand why this matters, matters? You have to look at how Diddy thinks about power. His belief in a potential pardon wasn't rooted in humility or legal strength. It was rooted in the idea that he remained valuable to powerful people. He thought his name still carried weight, that his influence in entertainment and culture could be leveraged when the time came. But the landscape changed while he was locked up, and that shift became crystal clear once Nicki began publicly aligning herself with political players, not subtly, boldly. She positioned herself as a voice with reach, stability, and a fan base that actually moves numbers. And for a politician, that's currency. This is where the emotional blow comes in. Diddy, once the self-proclaimed gatekeeper of the culture, now watches someone else occupy the very space he thought he controlled. And what cuts deepest is the timing. At the exact moment he's trying to convince the world and himself that he's still relevant, someone else is demonstrating influence in a way he no longer can. The transition here is key. It's not jealousy, at least not in the surface-level sense. It's fear. The fear that his leverage has been replaced. Nicki's moves signal something Diddy never wanted to admit. Influence isn't permanent, access isn't guaranteed, and political usefulness can be reassigned overnight. People close to the situation say this is why he's furious, not because Nicki is thriving, but because her prominence highlights his decline. He thought he would be the cultural figure politicians turned to when they needed support. Instead, he's watching someone else become the preferred option. And inside Fort Dix, where the future feels smaller with every passing day, that realization hits harder than any headline about a denied appeal or a joke on television. Because if Nicki truly becomes the voice politicians listen to, then Diddy's last lifeline, the idea that his name still carries power, may be gone for good. This emotional unraveling sets the stage for Section 7, where the consequences of this shift, legally, socially, and personally, come into focus. What happens next isn't just about bruised ego, it's about consequences, real ones. Because once Diddy loses the perception of influence, every part of his situation starts to change. Influence, after all, has always been his shield. It protected him in business, in media, in public life. It framed him as someone powerful enough to be untouchable. But now, the shield is cracking. And this moment, the rise of someone else in a position he once believed belonged to him, exposes a reality he's spent years avoiding. Without leverage, he becomes ordinary. And ordinary people don't get special treatment, special access, or unofficial favors. They get the full weight of the system. This is why sources say Diddy is far more shaken than he appears. Not because Nicki did anything to him directly, but because the system he believed he understood no longer bends in his direction. The transition here is subtle but profound. Once your influence is replaced, your mistakes are no longer overlooked. Your moves are no longer forgiven. Your name no longer buys you time. Insiders say this is exactly what Diddy fears most, that the world outside no longer needs him, and the people he assumed would fight for him have already found someone new to invest in. And without relevance, his long-shot plans for political support, public rehabilitation, and even appeals become dramatically weaker. In other words, the very thing he built his persona on, cultural control, is slipping away faster than he can respond. And inside a cell with no access to spin the narrative, no platform to defend himself, and no guaranteed allies, that loss feels bigger than any courtroom defeat. Because losing status isn't just a career blow. For someone like Diddy, it's an identity crisis, one that bleeds into every corner of his present reality. Which brings us directly to Section 8, where the pressure around him, legally, socially, and even inside Fort Dix, begins to intensify in ways he didn't see coming. The shift outside the prison doesn't stay outside for long. It follows Diddy straight into Fort Dix. Because once word spreads that his influence may be slipping, the entire atmosphere around him changes. Prison is a place where perception shapes reality, and reality shapes survival. Inside, inmates pay attention to every rumor, every headline, every whispered update from the outside world. And when they realize someone isn't as powerful as they once claimed, the tone around them shifts quickly. That's the pressure Diddy is feeling now. It starts small, people watching instead of listening, questioning instead of assuming, picking apart every move he makes. And prison staff? They're not oblivious. When an inmate's influence seems to waver, the institution tightens the rope. Suddenly, the rules become sharper, the scrutiny becomes heavier, the tolerance gets thinner. And for someone who lived decades without boundaries, that change hits hard. Worse, insiders say this shift is happening at the same time the LAPD case is gaining traction, meaning new investigators, new interviews, and a fresh layer of uncertainty. The possibility of state charges is no longer a theoretical threat. It's a developing situation that shadows him daily. And the truth is, he feels it. Every conversation is monitored differently. Every phone call carries more weight. Every privilege feels temporary. Even the staff, according to sources, have started treating him with a level of detachment that wasn't there before, the kind that suggests they can sense the tide turning. This isn't about punishment, it's about reality closing in, because when outside influence fades, inside leverage evaporates with it. And for Diddy, who once operated with confidence bordering on certainty, this is uncharted territory, a space where he no longer controls the narrative, the room, or even his own future. By the time the political dust settles, one truth becomes impossible for Diddy to ignore. The world outside is moving without him. That's the part no one prepares for. Not the lawyers, not the publicists, not the fans who once treated him like cultural royalty. Life continues, and the industry that used to orbit around him doesn't pause to keep his seat warm. And this is where the reality lands the hardest. Because while Diddy waits for appeals, monitors behavior reports, and navigates the pressure inside Fort Dix, everyone he once relied on for protection or favors is slowly stepping in a different direction. The people who once benefited from proximity are now building new alliances, new strategies, and new narratives that don't include him. This isn't betrayal, this is self-preservation. In the entertainment world, influence has an expiration date, and it speeds up when someone is no longer present. Diddy once shaped trends. Now he's watching his own relevance dim from a prison common area, where the jokes are louder than the loyalty. But the deeper issue isn't fame, it's legacy. For the first time, he has to confront the possibility that even if he walks out of prison someday, he won't be returning to the version of life he left behind. Industry circles evolve, political alliances shift, public sentiment hardens, and culture doesn't often forgive a story this public, this documented, and this complicated. This is what people close to him say he's struggling with the most. Not the cell, not the sentence, not even the investigations, but the awareness that outside power is evaporating faster than inside influence can replace it. And once that happens, the future becomes something he no longer directs. It becomes something that simply happens to him. As the days start blending together inside Fort Dix, something begins shifting in the background. Quietly, steadily, and in a way Diddy didn't plan for. Because for years, the man operated with a single belief: as long as he could project power, people would treat him like he still had it. And for most of his life, that strategy worked flawlessly. But prison has a way of stripping away performance. And this is where the illusion finally cracks. Behind the scenes, staff members, legal analysts, and even inmates describe the same turning point. The moment Diddy started realizing that influence isn't a blanket you can pull over yourself when the temperature drops. It's a currency, and once it runs out, there is no emergency credit line. For the first time in decades, Diddy is surrounded by individuals who aren't impressed by fame, wealth, or reputation. They're watching how he carries himself now, not how he moved on the outside. And in an environment like this, perception shifts quickly. Some inmates whisper that he's anxious, trying to maintain authority without the structure that used to protect him. Others say he spends more time by himself, more guarded, more aware that every misstep follows him through the building. And the staff, they see a man used to orchestrating outcomes, suddenly forced into a system he cannot manage. But the moment that truly changes things isn't dramatic, it isn't loud, it isn't even public. It's that subtle realization that no matter what argument his legal team makes, no matter what promises swirl around him, no matter who he believes is waiting to help, his situation is now bigger than his connections. What he once controlled is controlling him, and that's the part he cannot talk his way around. Because prison doesn't run on image, it runs on compliance, and he has already shown the system he struggles with that. This internal shift becomes the biggest storyline of all. Not the jokes, not the shade, not the celebrity reactions. This moment right here, where Diddy starts understanding that the outside world is rewriting the narrative without him, and his attempts to hold on to the remnants of his old life are slipping faster than he can catch them. And that's where we'll leave it for now, in that uncomfortable space where the noise stops and the truth starts echoing a little louder. Because no matter how many stories swirl around him, no matter how many headlines his team tries to reshape, one thing is clear: the world Diddy once controlled isn't waiting for him anymore. Every move he makes inside Fort Dix is watched, documented, whispered about, and stacked against the choices that brought him here. Whether he realizes it or not, the next chapter isn't going to be written by influence, money, or nostalgia. It's going to be written by behavior, consequences, and the people who finally feel safe enough to speak. And if what we're hearing continues, things may shift faster and harder than his team is prepared for. If you've been following this saga from the beginning, you already know every time we think the story can't twist again, it does. So stay plugged in, because the next development could turn everything we thought we understood on its head. Before you click away, do me one favor, drop your thoughts below. Do you think Diddy is finally facing the reality he avoided for years? Or is this another setup for an even bigger unraveling? Make sure you hit like, share your take in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because here on Fame Insight, the whispers don't stay whispers for long. Fame Insight, where the truth gets louder.